This video is to help you with number 7 on CR Helper number 29. This problem must be a similar problem to the one on your CR. There was a large animal adoption agency that adopted during Animal Adoption Week. The ratio of dogs to the total amount of animals was 6 to 10. So this must be dogs adopted to total animals adopted. What percent of animals adopted were dogs? Okay, so for part A, percent is always out of 100. So part that were dogs over total equals percent out of 100, because the total percent would be 100%. So it's what percentage were dogs out of your total percentage of 100. Well, you know the ratio of dogs to the total animals adopted were 6 to 10. So 6 to 10 would be how many out of 100? If 6 out of every 10 dogs, out of every 10 animals adopted were dogs, how many out of every 100 animals adopted were dogs? So we just set up an equivalent ratio. How do you get from 10 to 100? You multiply by 10. What do you have to do if you're multiplying the denominator by 10? You multiply the numerator by 10. 6 times 10 is 60. So 60% of the animals adopted were dogs. If 60 out of 100 animals adopted were dogs, that's 60%. If there were 312 animals adopted, how many dogs were adopted during that weekend? Well, we could go back. I'll use your, I would assume maybe they want me to use your percent. We could go back to the original, but I guess I'll use the 60%. So again, we do part that were dogs over your total equals the percent that were dogs out of your total percent, which is 100. All right, so the total dogs adopted were 312, or the total animals adopted were 312. We don't know how many of those were dogs. Here, if I say, but I know 60% were dogs, I'm going to do my arrow this way. Just makes my life a little bit easier. How do I get from 100 to 312? Well, I would multiply 100 by 3.12. That gets me to 312. So I have to take 60 and multiply by 3.12. Okay? 60 out of 100, how many out of 312? So you look at your denominator. How do I get from 100 to 312? I multiply by 3.12. Move that decimal point over 2 places, because there's 2 zeros there. So if I'm multiplying the denominator by 3.12, I have to multiply the numerator by 3.12. So 3.12 times 60. Of course, I love to estimate, so this is about 3 times 60. 3 times 6 is 18, so 3 times 60 is 180. So about 180 of the animals were dogs. Let's see how many. 0 times 2 is 0, 0 times 1 is 0, 0 times 3 is 0. Move into the tens place. Put a 0 here in the tens place. 6 times 2 is 12. Put down a 2, carry a 1. 6 times 1 is 6, and 1 more is 7. 6 times 3 is 18. 0, 2, 7, 8, 1. And so we know it's right around 180 when we estimate it. So if we move that decimal point over 2, this decimal point comes over 2. We know about 187 dogs. So about 187 dogs. Okay. The same weekend, 3 out of every 8 adoptions at a location outside the agency was for a cat. Okay. There were 112 animals at the other location. How many cats were adopted? So for this one, we care about the part that were cats out of the total cats. And then again, the part that were cats. out of, oh, not total cats. Sorry. The part that were cats out of the total animals adopted. And here the part that were cats out of the total animals adopted. So we know 3 out of every 8 adoptions were cats. 3 out of every 8 were cats. This is how you'll do it in 7th grade. You just look at that. That gives you one side of the equivalent ratio or the proportion. On the other side, you know 112 animals total were adopted. So you say, oh, if 3 out of every 8 were cats, how many out of 112? 8 times what gives us 112? Well, what we have to do is we have to take 112 and divide by 8 to find that out. 8 goes into 11 once. 11 minus 8 is 3. Drag down a 2. 8 goes into 32 4 times. All right. So it must be 14. 8 times 14 gets us to 112. I'm going to multiply my denominator by 14. I'll multiply my numerator by 14. 3 times 14 will give us how many of the animals adopted that day were cats. 14 times 3. 4 times 3 is 12. 3 times 1 is 3, and 1 is 4. 42. 42 must have been cats. Hopefully that helps you figure out this problem. Just so you know, in the part B, we could have done 6 to 10 is how many out of 312, and you would have come up with the same answer either way. All right, hopefully that helps.